Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to see all of you here. I mean, this place is packed, and so many of you online. There's probably a couple thousand right now, and I just want to thank you for being there. Those of you I don't know, and those of you I do know. My brother, he had a successful cancer surgery. Wanted to say that, and if you want to say hi, Fred, or congratulations, Fred, go ahead and do that, because I'll tell you what, he's a tough guy, and he needed to have that happen with him. So keep him in your prayers. Gosh, the only person I couldn't see today was Seth because of that camouflage thing. You know, all I could see was his tie. I thought that's what his message was going to be on. But anyway, where did he go? All right, okay. Anyway, so, you know, I kind of want to just set the mood for this, because sometimes, I know I always has, throughout my life as a student of the Bible when I was a kid and then at the seminary, I always thought the disciples were a little dull sometimes, you know. They're a little, dim, you know, up here, like, come on, don't you get it? And, you know, but we got to realize we got hindsight. They didn't have hindsight, you know. They were being told things. They weren't sure how to understand it. I mean, can you imagine listening to parables all day and trying to figure them out? You know, I mean, I know they could because it was written for them, spoken for them. But if we think about this, at 9 in the morning, they saw their teacher, their friend, their rabbi, Jesus, their Savior, being nailed to a cross, and there was nothing they could do about it. Nothing. You know, Peter, where is his head at? He denied him 3 times. All the rest of the disciples fled from him, all out of fear. I mean, they were human. They were just human. And they knew they couldn't stand up against the Romans and against the leaders of the Jews and all that. And then, so he's on the cross, and they see him suffocating, because that's what it's all about. It's about asphyxiation. I mean, that's why they give you enough room to be able to move up and down the cross, you know, to catch your breath. And finally, when you don't have the strength to do that anymore, you die. It's a horrible way to die. And so that's going on from 12 to noon. And then at noon, everything gets dark. And then at 3 o'clock, right after Jesus, you know, screams out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Because he had become sin for us. I mean, even for our sins today, I know it's something we don't understand, but this is what the Bible says. It's like God exists outside of eternity, and he plants his cross right in the middle of our time, you know, on both sides, and says, this is who forgives you. You know, for those who are looking to the promise, for those of us who look back to the promise fulfilled in Jesus. And but at 3 o'clock, everything just went crazy. All hell broke loose, literally. It really did. I mean, there was an earthquake. I mean, the earth shook. The curtain temple was torn in two from top to bottom, which was not supposed to happen, by the way, you know. And then dead people breaking out of their tombs, you know. I'd have been a little scared. And it was so frightening, such a traumatic event. Even the soldier at the foot of the cross of Jesus said, surely this it was the Son of God. And so people came to faith because of that, and other people just ran away scared. It was very, very traumatic event. And the reason it was because these disciples didn't know something we do. So I'm going to read our text, and we're going to walk through this. John chapter 20. And you can read about this. You get different resurrection stories from different vantage points, different perspectives. It doesn't make them contradictory. It actually just informs us even more so what was taking place. But in verse 1 of chapter 20 of John, early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved. And who do you think that was? It was John. It was John, because John is the one who wrote this, so he's practicing humility by not naming himself, is what I believe. And then he says, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb. We don't know where they have put him." Right? So right away, you know she's not getting it. So Peter and the other disciple, John, right, started for the tomb. This is where John loses his humility. Both were running, but the other disciple, John, outran Peter and reached the tomb first. I just think that's really funny. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. At least he was honest. Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb, because that's Peter, right? And so he goes straight in. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. And finally, the other disciple, John, who had reached the tomb first, Had to remind us. Also then went inside, he saw and believed. Now this is kind of different right here because we don't know what he believed. Well, he believed it was empty. He believed he rose. Not sure because the very next verse says they, meaning the disciples, his followers, still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. I'm going to give him credit for believing he rose, but not the had part. Not that he had to. And that's what's so critical here. And then verse 10, then the disciples went back to where they were staying. And I want to go one more verse, verse 11. Now Mary stood outside the tomb and she was crying. So what we know that the disciples didn't, what we know that Mary Magdalene didn't, and because she didn't know it, she was weeping. Because the disciples didn't know it, they went hiding. Because Thomas didn't know it, he was doubting. But because of the tombs that were broken open, all the dead people walking, and all the prophets that were talking and writing, we now know it. And because of the pain that we have in this life and all kinds of strife, and because of tears over stress and this COVID mess, you and I not only know what we need to know, but we know everyone needs to know it. And that is why we celebrate today. And that is why we lift up the cross and all these crosses. And this is why we reveal it. And from the cross to the empty tomb, we then prove it. We then prove it. And because this is what we know in here, in our hearts, to be true, is why we say it and shout it out. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Alleluia. And that's the truth. Just from a logical standpoint, you'd think that if this were just some crazy story about a man dying and rising, it would probably die out after a few years, right? It kind of makes you think something happened, doesn't it? I sure think so. Well, for those of you who were part of this group here leading into Lent, we did a series called Cross Perspective. When we dealt with it from 5 different perspectives of the cross, like what was God's perspective of the cross. And God's perspective in a nutshell is that this is what he needed. He needed the cross. He needed the death on that cross. The wages of sin is death. That had to appease, that had to make up for the sin of the world, our sin even today. Remember, the cross is set in all eternity. And what happened on there forgives sins before, sins post, all of that. Jesus' perspective. His perspective of the cross, he didn't want to go to it, but he knew he had to. Because he was the only one who was perfect. And he was fully human. That's why he had to become human, so that it would count for us. And then, of course, we have Satan, who just got it wrong. He thought he had victory and then discovered, I guess I didn't win. And the church, this is a reminder when we look at the cross, what our job is, what our mission is to do as the church, because we are the church. And that is to reveal to people what the cross really means. And then the world's perspective, well, they have quite a misperception. And today, we have one more perspective, though, that we want to talk about. I think it's really the most important perspective. What's yours? And what's mine? When we look at the cross, what is our perspective? And the reason this is so important, in my opinion, is because the majority of the world in which we live, when people look at the cross, they have a perspective either of judgment or of foolishness, that we're idiots for believing in it, or just it's ornamentation. It doesn't mean anything more than that. And these worldly perspectives can impact ours, especially when we're in the world, as we're called to be. As we're called to be. So today, I want to give us something, including me, to remember and use when we start to lose the Christian perspective that a lot of us grew up with. When you start to have doubt. When you start to have doubt about what the cross of Jesus really stands for. Especially when we hear the perspectives of so many people in the world. So I just want to lead through some examples of that today. You read some magazines, and I'll just name it. Time magazine has never had a problem, denouncing Christianity. Bill Maher, I've used him almost every year on Easter. I talk about it because he talks so much about it, against it, in fact, I'll quote from him. He says, "Oh, come on, you ignorant, foolish Christians. It's time to get rid of your silly gods and your fairy tale mythology. All you got is the cross of a dead man." That's what he says. And that's what a lot of people say. You know what I say? I say, oh, no. We got more than a cross and a dead man. We got the open tomb. But it doesn't just start and stop with people like Bill Maher or magazines like that. Critics of Jesus say, from other religions, they say, oh, but we got Muhammad. And we have all of his words right here. These are the true words in the Quran. And if we play our cards right and flip the switch at the right time, we're going to end up in paradise, not you. We're going to get the 72 virgins, not you. All you got is a man on a cross who died. That's what they say. And you know what I say? I say, no, we got more than a cross. What do we got? We got the open tomb. When you hear other critics, critics of the Christian faith in general, people say, oh, but we got it figured out. We got to figure it out. See, it doesn't have anything to do with a God. It's how through reincarnation. Because we're going to keep coming back, maybe for hundreds and thousands of different lives. And you might start out as a tomato, and if you're the best tomato you can be, you can end up becoming a zucchini, and then an aardvark, and then even a human being. And then when you learn to hum the hum of Ekankar, you can reach nirvana. And then they look at us and they say, all you got is a silly cross. And I'm like, you're saying our cross is silly? And I say, no, we got more than a cross. We got the empty tomb. And that's a fact. And then there are those intellectual critics, we've all met them, right, of the Christian faith, who say things like, but it's all in the science of the mind, you see? It says so right here in the writings of the greatest science fiction author of all time. That's what we got. What do you got? You got a dead man on a cross. That's what they say. And I say, no, we got more than that. We got the empty tomb. And then, still, especially critics of Jesus and his gift of grace, of saving faith, that he did it all. We hear from people, no, we got a book right here from an angel in heaven guaranteeing your own planet, a wife of your choice, and people who weren't as good as you in your life, they're going to be waiting on you hand and foot for all of eternity. All you got to do is a mission trip and some community service. What do you got to do? And you know what I say to that? We don't got to do a thing, because Jesus did it all. He died on that cross to forgive, and he rose from that grave to give us eternal life. How do we know that? We got the empty tomb. And that's the reality. If you didn't pick up in this series that we've been having called Cross Perspective, I think it's important to remember, as much as we've focused on the cross in that series, a death on a cross without a resurrection from the grave is pointless. And a resurrection from the grave without a death is meaningless. But an empty cross and an empty tomb, together, it means everything. It means life. It means victory. It means victory for you and me over sin, over death, and even over the devil himself. It meant victory for the disciples, weeping while they were hiding. Victory for Mary when she was weeping at the tomb. Victory for me and you when we're weeping because we've lost a loved one. Because the bottom line is, their tears then, because of what they now know and what we know, they turn from tears of sorrow to tears of joy, because we have the empty tomb. It's really hard to beat that. And when I was putting this message together, I always fight with myself, because I want so much to just pull out intellectual proof, because there's always somebody that needs that, and I get that. I just really believe that every single man, woman, and child in this world, God is calling us to connect them to the truth, to reveal what that cross is all about. People need to know the purpose of life. It's not always what they think. They also need to know the way to the next life. And that's through Jesus Christ as their Savior. And the only way people get, for God's reason alone, he uses us to connect those people. Get that. Whether it's an offering of time, of service, of your talents, or of your treasures. He uses us. Whether it's us talking about it, living it out in love, he's using us. That's what he has chosen to do. I always think about Jesus ascending into heaven and the angels saying, all right, now we get to go down. He goes, no, stop. You see that motley crew down there of disciples? They're the ones who are going to change the world. And here we are, changing the world. Now, for those of you who are here right now, or maybe you're even online and you're always looking for more proof, I get that. I live most of my life needing that as well. And it's not that I don't like it either. But if you're looking for proof of the resurrection, then let's take some notes, because we got a lot of proof, all right? And I'm just going to list these off. Most of you know these. If you've forgotten, you can write them down too. I mean, just think about this. Here's one. Like the proof that after Jesus was buried and died, the Bible says very clearly he appeared 11 different times to over 550 people to prove that he was alive. Eyewitness accounts. I call that proof. Like the proof that the disciples switching their day of worship from Saturday to Sunday. Something huge had to take place to make such a change in their faith, in their practice. Well, it was huge. It was the resurrection. Like the proof that the disciples overnight were changed from men who were hiding in a room for fear of their lives to men who came out of that room and suffered torturous deaths because they refused to stop talking and preaching about their fact that Jesus Christ is alive, that he rose from that grave. That's huge. Or like the proof, and this is the one to get. Look at something in the Gospel of Matthew. The Roman government did everything they could to keep Jesus from coming out of that tomb, and they couldn't. I mean, all the power of earth and hell combined, they tried to keep Christ a prisoner, and they couldn't do it. Like the proof, I just learned about this one. Seth Illick was telling me this. By the way, I like the tie, Seth. Charles Colson, he was a special counsel to Richard Nixon, President Nixon, and he says this is what convinced him that the resurrection is true. You know what convinced Charles Colson that the resurrection is true? Watergate. Here's how he says it. He said, there were 12 of the most powerful men in the world who couldn't keep a secret for 3 weeks. And you're telling me 12 disciples could keep a lie for 40 years? Impossible. That's what he says. Here's the last one, like the proof that every single religious leader from the beginning of time, their bones are in the ground, except Jesus. That's it. That's because he rose. I love asking this question. I think it's fair at this point. If there were a road that we knew we could take to get directly into heaven, to get into heaven, but you came to a fork in the road and you didn't know which way to go. But there were 2 men at that fork in the road. One of them was dead and one of them was alive. Which one would you ask for directions? What does Jesus call himself in John 14:6? I am the way. I am the way. It's so tempting. It's so tempting when I get in debates about this with unbelievers, with siblings, with, I love talking about this stuff. You're just pulling out these proofs and deconstructing all the theories of the critics, to convince them, to try to convince them, that Jesus didn't just die, but he rose from that grave. But I always come to this point whenever I have those kinds of discussion with some people, what good would it do anyway? You either know it or you don't. You just know it or you don't. It's between you and God. I can't shake you hard enough. You can't shake me hard. We can't drive it in anybody else's life. We plant the seeds. God's the one who has to do the growing, and the person has to do the allowing. Because God does give us that terrible free will to say no. So my favorite cartoonist of all time is Johnny Hart, a strong Christian man. And when I was in the LA area for my first 13 years of ministry, it was interesting because I always read the comics, and he was always in there. And then one Easter, he wasn't there. And I wrote him a note. And so he sent me the comic that wasn't being allowed anymore to go in there. It's not the one I'm going to read to you now. He actually sent me some comics that had never been published by the LA Times, so I put them in a very safe place. I have no idea where they are right now. So they're in a really safe place. But I got this book, and I wanted to read one for you, and I think we can put it on the screens too, because I love this one. Here's a caveman. Just put yourself in his shoes. I can. Are you listening, God? Faith is knowing you're not just talking to a rock. It's not easy to believe in you, God. We never see you. How come you never show yourself? How do we know you even exist? And this daisy sprouts up right in front of him, and a volcano goes off, and then a wave crashes over him. Then 2 meteors collide in the sky. He gets drenched. The 2 meteors form a cross. And finally, he comes out of the water drenched. He says, okay, I give up. And as he walks past a burning bush and an open tomb, he says, every time I bring up the subject, all we get are interruptions. I'm sorry, I just think that's really funny. Because it's so true. Because it's between you and God. And our job isn't to shake somebody into faith. It's to just love them and let God do the shaking. But it's still so tempting to pull out all these proofs. But you either know it or you don't. It all depends on your perspective. However, there is one proof of the resurrection I'd like to leave you with this morning. I almost always do. As I was looking back at past sermons, I'm like, yeah, I use this almost every year, but I like repeats like this one. I believe it's the greatest proof that Jesus rose from the grave. I like this one so much because it hit me. Because I like to do this too much up here. And when I put this aside and I realize, wait, it's what's in my heart that matters. It's the greatest proof that Jesus rose from the grave, and it's the only proof that you can't tear apart intellectually. And the proof is this: you believe it. You believe it in here to be true. No one can take that away from you. No one can take that faith, gifted you by God the Holy Spirit, in your heart away from you. So here's the illustration. Before communism in Russia, it was common for Christians on Easter to always say kind of what we did this morning, right? Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Hallelujah. They'd write it on walls. They'd send letters like that to people. And when the communist regime took over, the person they'd put in charge of the head of education, one of their great thinkers of the time, he was given the responsibility to hold a public forum to renounce Christianity. So he invited every Christian who wanted to come. And at that time, a Christian was not, persecuted. And so all these, they say like 10,000 Christians showed up to listen to what this guy had to say. And he was really good. So he went on and on and on, talking about the Christian religion being a fairy tale and the resurrection of Jesus being just a myth, a pure myth. And when he had finished, he felt so sure that he couldn't be challenged. He just looked at it and said, would anybody else like to come up here and debate with me or prove to me anything that I've said today that is false? Come on up. And after just a couple of seconds, a young pastor walked forward and stood on the platform, and he turns and he faces the audience and he says, Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. The audience responded all at the same time as one. It didn't matter what they'd heard to go up here because they knew what was in here. And that's what God wants you and me to hold on to. One of the greatest gifts of ministry, I think, for a pastor is when a child, like in confirmation, will profess their faith, and you know it's not just words in their head, it's in their heart. And this last examination that we did with our confirmation students, It was pretty special. This Leona started this years ago. She would always ask the kids, and so I started doing the same. If you were to stand before the gates of heaven tonight, God forbid, and God were to say to you, why should I let you into my kingdom, what would you say? Now the answer the kids say, because they learn this, and I'll be real honest with you, I don't care what else they learn. This is what they need to learn, because we are one of the very few Christian denominations that believes that your salvation is a certainty when you believe in Jesus as your Savior. So their answer is, I believe in Jesus as my Savior. That's it. It's not what I did. It's not that I'm better than somebody else. My brother, he's no good, but I'm good. It's none of that. It's just I believe in Jesus as my Savior. So this one little girl, she's sitting there. She paused after I asked that question, what would you say? And you could see tears. She was wearing a mask. You could see tears in her eyes. And she looked right between me and Pastor Stephen. And she said, because God sent his only son. She's just choking up. God sent his only son to die for me, to pay for my sins on the cross. And then she looked me straight in the eye. And she said, and I don't deserve it. And all I could say was, you're right, you don't. And neither do I. And neither do you. Neither do any of us. But that's why we call it grace. And God has gifted us with that grace. He has given us the gift of faith. And that's why the cross and the open tomb are inseparable. We can't talk about one without talking about the other. And I pray that God teaches us that when we talk to people about what we believe and we point to the cross, we don't stop there. We talk about the open tomb. When I look at the cross, that's what I see. I need to. That's my perspective. And I pray that it's yours as well. In Jesus' name, amen.